Good afternoon and welcome to a very special interview news event with a brilliant, influential, and kind-hearted woman, a kind-hearted grandma at that. I'm speaking, of course, about the one and only Lesley Israel, and if you've had any interest in politics or global affairs in the last 5 decades or so, odds are you've probably come across her name. She is a seriously accomplished person, having worked on numerous presidential campaigns and chaired many esteemed organizations. She has been honored by the Jewish community on countless occasions for her work within her faith. And she has spearheaded global initiatives that have quite literally changed the world. Named Most Powerful Woman in Washington by Washington Magazine in 1991, Lesley Israel left the Camber Group and started her own company, Politics, Inc. In 2016, she was appointed to the U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad by none other than President Barack Obama. The list just goes on, so I think the best thing to do at this point would be to just jump right into the interview. Lesley, how are you today?
Just fine, thank you. And how are you?
Very well, thanks for asking. Well, let's go right back to the beginning, because that's really the best place to start, especially for people who don't know who you are yet, or as well as they should. In the beginning, did you plan to get into the world of politics, or did you kind of pivot there from another field? Either way, what drew you to it?
Well, I was raised, my parents were journalists, so I was raised in the edges of the political world in Washington, but in a nonpartisan way. And just gradually, as you watch the world of politics and as you cover it, for me at least, it was something I didn't want to just be an observer. I wanted to be part of it.
Wow, very good. So, I think a lot of people have wondered, because you've worn so many hats over the years, figuratively speaking, what was a typical work day in the life of Lesley Israel like when you were first starting out? And how did that typical work day change as you advanced in your career? And also, what was your favorite time of all?
Well, it did change. We had 2 young kids. I didn't start working until they started school, but they were still in school and they were little boys. So I had to build my life around their schedules initially. I was doing volunteer work and working part-time at that point because I still had to worry about them. But that changed as I advanced. They got older and were more self-reliant. Instead of being 5, they were 15. So I just gradually, and my workday changed to adapt what I was doing, whether I was working here, whether I was working overseas. And my favorite time of all, I guess, was, I don't know, the end of the day when I got to go home with my husband and kids.
Right. Now, you've worked for several presidential campaigns. Working in a prominent position on even one presidential campaign sounds like a daunting task and some pretty stressful work. Is it really as exhausting as it looks?
No, not as you can. I'm not doing it because it's a quote-unquote job. I was doing it because I cared about it. And in each case, I was doing something that I really wanted to do. In many cases, I was doing jobs that I was inventing as we went along, because campaigns were changing in those days, mostly because communications were changing. So as we got into a world of internet, for instance, and more TV stuff, it's stressful, but I don't think it was exhausting.
Okay.
It mattered.
Right. Now, you served as senior vice president of the very well-known Camber Group for 6 years before leaving to start Politics, Inc., a political consulting firm. How did you know when it was time to make that move? And did you achieve your vision as intended? Does the company still exist today?
Well, no, Politics Inc. does not exist today, but we started Politics Inc. within the Camber Group. The Camber Group was a consulting firm that heavily represented labor unions. And we realized, my partners and I realized that if we were going to do politics, we had to have a separate technical organization, because not every group, not every other client would agree with the clients I was representing politically. So I made that move at the point when we started moving from just representing unions to my representing political clients. And yes, I achieved my vision as intended. I got to do a lot of things that made a difference, and I did politics. I actually worked in politics at two different levels. I worked in the United States on political campaigns, whether they were presidential campaigns or congressional campaigns that were clients of ours. But I also started doing a lot of international democracy at one point. And so I would go overseas and help organize elections in emerging democracies, help write their election laws, or just monitor their elections to make sure that they were legit.
Right. That's important work, to say the least. And you were involved in the Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. How did your involvement in this group begin, and what was the overall experience like? Have the international properties you fought for remained protected to this day?
When it was formed, it was just sort of the gang got together, involved in forming the Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, and it was the umbrella under which I was able to do work, and other people as well, on elections overseas. And we weren't just working with Americans and with members of the Commission. We were working with volunteers or professionals from all kinds of countries around the world who are supporting the same campaign. Your partner was almost never another American.
Right.
It was somebody from Poland or Bosnia or wherever.
Sure. Okay.
And the properties have changed, and the names have changed, the structures have changed. It's been a long time. It's been many decades, and mostly they remain protected. Not all of them. For instance, you look at what's happening in the world in Hungary, and it's an iffy world.
Yeah, to say the least. Our current situation in Ukraine must be especially meaningful to you, having worked so extensively not only in Europe but all over the world to protect and promote democracy. So I'm wondering, how does something like this Russian invasion happen in the first place? Was it inevitable, in your opinion? What could have been done to prevent it, if anything? And what do you predict will be the outcome, and what will that mean?
When something like this happened, you got a guy named like Putin who wants to take charge of things and moves in and does it. It's not something Russia did as a country. It's something I think that he did as the leader of that country. And it was not inevitable, but since he was there and he wanted to have this role, and he had the power to start it. I'm not sure there would have been anything we could have done to prevent that one. I mean, much of what we did around the world, and I work primarily in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, because that's where the United States sent us, was you all work together with local people doing what they wanted to help them move forward into a democracy that they've never known before. He, of course, is trying to take that democracy away with what he's doing in Ukraine. I hope the outcome will be that he loses. He's Russia is a strong and important country, but there are a great many more countries that are on the other side of the coin on this one. And I predict that ultimately we will beat him, and that will mean the world moves forward another step in the correct direction. But for how long it goes in that direction as opposed to elsewhere, and what the cost will be, who knows?
Yeah, I guess it remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Well, we live in especially divisive times, politically speaking. In your experience, have we ever been so divided as a country, or is this something new? And is there anything that can unite everyone at this point? And what do you think caused all of this in the first place?
Well, have we ever been so divided as a country? Well, we did have something called a civil war.
Yeah. You're going way back now, yeah.
Yeah, but of course we've been divided as a country.
Yeah.
And politically speaking, we're often we were united when it came to World War II, for instance.
Right.
Pretty much. But there have been a lot of smaller wars where we've been divided, whether it was Korea or Vietnam. I don't think the people of the United States, frankly, are as emotionally involved with this one as they have been with some others, mostly because they don't see it up close and personal.
Mm-hmm. Interesting perspective. Now, your work in the Jewish community has been celebrated far and wide for many, many decades. Most notable amongst these accomplishments is perhaps the time you spent helming the National Coalition Supporting Soviet Jewry and Bender Jewish Community Center. You even received a Special Service Award from the latter. Are you still active in the Jewish community?
Not particularly. Only because I no longer live in Washington. We've moved out into to what's called the Eastern Shore of Maryland on the other side of the Chesapeake Bay, so that I'm involved in our local community, but it's a much smaller, less active community. We have a synagogue, but we don't have things like a Jewish community center and all. Yeah. Otherwise, I would still be, I've still been involved in some of the national stuff, but I'm backing off some of that just because nobody should sit on the same board for 20 years.
Right.
It's someone else's turn.
Keep it fresh.
Yeah, keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Somebody else's.
Yeah. Okay, in 1990, Washington Magazine named you one of the 100 most powerful women. One would be hard-pressed to find a woman who has used her power for good more than you have. Looking back, do you have any regrets about your career? Are there any things that you wish you could have done differently, or what are your feelings on that?
I have no regrets at all. I loved everything I did. Mm-hmm. I think it was for good. And I didn't think of it as using my power. I thought of it as using me, myself, my efforts to do what I thought was good and was necessary, not only for Washington, but ultimately for the rest of the world. And the only thing I wish I could have done, if I could have Xeroxed myself, I could have done twice as much.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that the truth? Well said. So, what advice do you have for young women in your field just starting out? What words of wisdom can you share with them that might spare them some of the hard lessons learned in the intense world of politics?
Get into it. Do what you want to do, but cooperate with other people. Remember that there are a lot of people there who've been around a long time and know what they're doing. Work with them, not against them. And but do what really matters to you. And that if you don't believe in it, don't do it. And if you don't care about it, don't do it. But do get yourself involved and look to see where the needs are and do what the needs are. I mean, they're not the same today as they were then. In my day, we didn't have the internet the way we've got it today, for instance. So it's just to get into there and remember that you don't play this game to make money. You'll get paid something, but you're not going to get rich playing the game.